Okay, so humanity almost went extinct. Or did it?
Here's the thing. There's something strange sitting in our DNA.
When geneticists measure how different any two humans actually are, the answer keeps coming back the same. Not very.
There's one subspecies of chimpanzee living in a single stretch of Central Africa that carries 2 to 3 times more genetic variety than we do. Which is strange when you think about it. There are 8 billion of us on every continent. To have 2 or 3 times less genetic variety than not even a species, a subspecies of chimpanzee living in one region, doesn't really make sense. So the logical thinking is, something did that to us. One hypothesis is that at some point, there were almost none of us left. In other words, we were almost extinct. It caused a bottleneck in our gene pool. Whatever variety we used to have, most of it just didn't make it through with us. But what extinction event caused the bottleneck? In 1998, an anthropologist called Stanley Ambrose published a theory. 74,000 years ago, a volcano called Toba went off on the island of Sumatra in Indonesia. This was the biggest eruption in millions of years. It was the mother of all volcanic eruptions. Ambrose's idea went like this. The eruption throws up enough ash to blot out the sun. The world freezes over, and the human race can't handle a change that sudden, so it gets cut down to a few thousand people huddled somewhere warm. For more than a decade, this theory got quoted as fact. But we eventually found out that it's wrong. In 2013, researchers found a layer of Toba's ash at the bottom of Lake Malawi in Africa. That ash had traveled 7,000 kilometers. When I said it was the mother of all eruptions, I wasn't kidding. Anyway, that discovery means you can compare the mud from before the ash fell with the mud from after. If the world had frozen, those should look different. They don't. The temperature only moved about 1.5 degrees. And there were other findings too. Ones that show people's lives carried on just like before. In South Africa, archaeologists found the ash buried inside an ancient campsite, with traces of people living there both below it and above. In India, which caught the heaviest ashfall on the planet, the same stone tools were found in similar quantities before and after the eruption. And in Ethiopia, when the land dried out, people just moved down to the river and started pulling fish out of the shrinking water holes. So the Toba eruption wasn't the cause of the bottleneck in our gene pool. After these findings, it got quiet. There was no more chatter about our near extinction. Maybe that theory is wrong. Maybe something else caused that bottleneck. But in 2023, a team published a paper in Science. According to that paper, the effective breeding population of our ancestors may have collapsed to about 1,280 individuals, and stayed that low for roughly 117,000 years. Just think about that. That's thousands of generations being born, having children, and dying, while the whole lineage sat balanced right at the edge of extinction. One prolonged drought, one new disease, one particularly ambitious lion. And maybe none of us would be here. But how do you even arrive at a number like that? They didn't find an ancient village with exactly 1,280 skeletons in it. It came from us. Researchers examined the genomes of 3,154 living people and used a method called FitCol to work backwards through our genetic history. Because your DNA is not just a set of instructions for building you. It's also a very damaged record of everyone who came before you. Every generation shuffles that record. Mutations accumulate. Some genetic variants spread, others disappear. And by looking at how common or rare those variants are today, researchers can estimate how large ancestral populations might have been. It's a little like walking into a kitchen after a party. You didn't see the party. Everyone's gone home. But there are 17 glasses in the sink, 6 empty pizza boxes, a broken chair, and someone's shoe in the freezer. From that evidence, you can try to reconstruct what happened. FitCol looked at the genetic mess left behind by hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution. And its reconstruction showed something dramatic. Between roughly 930,000 and 813,000 years ago, our ancestors appear to lose almost all of the genetic diversity they had. The researchers estimated an effective population size of around 1,280. But that phrase, effective population size, is extremely important because it does not mean there were literally 1,280 people alive. Effective population size is a measure of how a population is behaving genetically. Imagine 100 people living in a group, but only 10 of them have children whose family lines survive into the future. Genetically, we can only trace back to those 10 individuals. We have actually seen something like this in recent human history. Around 6,000 years ago, male genetic diversity collapsed, compared with women's. At one point, the male effective population size may have been around 1/17 of the female one. But 16 out of every 17 men hadn't suddenly disappeared. The human population was growing. The genetic collapse probably happened because some groups of men had far more surviving descendants than others. Maybe because wealth, status, or membership in a powerful family made reproductive success extremely unequal. Nothing had to kill most of the men. The genes only had to stop representing them. So even if the ancient estimate is correct, 1280 is not a head count. There may have been many more individuals alive. Still, an effective population size that low would be extraordinary. It's 10 times fewer than what would have been normal. And remember, they said it stayed that way for 117,000 years. Long enough for something like 99% of that variety to just drain out. The fossil record from this period backs it up too. Across that same stretch of time, it goes thin. Really thin. So what could have caused a decline that sharp in our ancestors' numbers? The strongest hypothesis is climate change. A completely separate group, working from rocks and old sea levels, found that the first really severe ice age of the Pleistocene era landed right around that time. Large parts of Africa became drier. Sea levels fell dramatically. Food and water sources would have shifted, vanished, or become less reliable. It suddenly became harder to survive, and nobody could make fire yet. The oldest evidence of anyone making a fire artificially is 400,000 years old. And it wasn't just us. Other animals took the same hit, and some species went extinct altogether. In the deep sea, an entire family of organisms disappeared during the same climate transition. So it seems we found a satisfactory explanation for the genetic bottleneck, right? Well, not yet. Any scientific finding needs to be checked by other people. 3 separate teams, working independently, went looking for the same crash in the same data. None of them found it. The first team built a fake dataset, an artificial population history where they knew, for an absolute fact, that no crash had ever happened. Just a slow, gentle decline. Nothing dramatic at all. Then they handed it to FitCol, the same program the original team had used, and asked it what it saw. FitCol reported a crash, a sharp one, almost exactly the same shape it had found in the real human data. Then, to be sure, they ran 2 rival programs over that same fake data. Both of those came back with the right answer, a gentle decline, no crash. Which is a problem. If your instrument finds a disaster in data you built yourself to contain no disaster, it's hard to trust it when it finds one in the real thing. The second team came at it from a completely different angle. When you're testing an idea like this, the obvious move is to line your result up against the simplest alternative and see which one fits the evidence better. The original paper hadn't done that. It had built a model with a crash in it, confirmed that the model fitted the data, and stopped there. So the second team ran the comparison themselves. Same data, but this time fitted to a model with no crash in it at all. The no crash version fitted better. And then a third team, using yet another method, worked through the genomes of 159 different populations. For that same window, 900,000 years ago, they came out with a figure somewhere between 10 and 15,000. Now, that sounds like a smaller crash compared to the 1280. Well, it isn't a crash at all. 10,000 is roughly the normal figure for our species. It's the number you'd expect to see if nothing much was happening. They weren't finding a gentler disaster. They were finding no disaster. And then there's one more problem. And this one doesn't need any research at all. 900,000 years ago, nobody had left Africa yet. Everybody was in one place. Which means whatever happened then happened to the ancestors of every single person alive today. You, me, everyone. So the market left should be sitting in all of our DNA. It isn't. It only shows up in the African samples. And that's not a critic's complaint. The original paper says so itself. Everywhere else, it can't be directly inferred. So is the original claim just wrong? Well, not really. A month ago, in July 2026, the original team hit back. They ran 10 billion simulations, comparing their program against the rival one. And their argument is, more or less, the reverse of the accusation. They say their program is the accurate one. They say the rivals are the ones missing real crashes. That when you hand those programs a bottleneck that genuinely happened, they walk straight past it. The two sides aren't running the same test. One side asked, "Does this thing cry wolf? Does it see a disaster where there isn't one?" The other asked, "Does that thing sleep through the wolf? Does it miss a disaster that's really there?" Both of those can be true at once. A smoke alarm that goes off every time you make toast can still be a smoke alarm that works. So nobody can tell you the answer right now. Not them, not me. Which might be annoying. I get it. I went into this expecting to come out with a satisfying answer. But there's still one fact that remains. Our own species has carried relatively little genetic diversity for hundreds of thousands of years. What we don't know is whether all our ancestors were once squeezed through a single population, the equivalent of just 1,280 breeders. Maybe they were. The climate was harsh enough. The possibility is real. And the scientists who discover the signal are still defending it. But it hasn't been proven. And perhaps that uncertainty gives us a more interesting story than the original headline. Because the lesson isn't that humanity survived one impossible apocalypse. It's that our history is full of disasters we'll never know about. Droughts with no written records. Diseases that left no name. Floods that erased entire communities. Generations that survived long enough to leave descendants. And generations that disappeared so completely that even their genes are gone. There may never have been one last stand. There may have been thousands of them. A family finding water. A group crossing an unfamiliar landscape. Someone trying a fish from a shrinking river because every other meal had disappeared. Small decisions made by people who had no idea that the future of humanity might depend on them. And somehow, enough of those decisions worked. Because after nearly 1 million years of climate shifts, eruptions, migrations, isolation, and probably several moments when things became far too close for comfort, we're still here.